Dino mudanyi Jesu ndirie murombo mwenine mufambi andinane upfumi ndodarudorwa Jesu ruzoni nyaradze nekunditungamira muve simba rangu ndoda moyo wa Jesu mundipe omutsa ndionese zviye dzone urombo wangu ndinoda mweya mtsvene ugondidzidzisa undionese Jesu muponesi wangu ndinomudanyi Jesu ndichamuonanyi muri mumraravu ngupachigaro chenyu pamwe nevana venyu ndichafara kwazvo kuimba murukudzo nekuona tenzi
where the hard questions are answered.
I would like to welcome you to another show, another episode of Hot Grill with Tim Zunde, where we interrogate the issues from the Bible and we answer the hard questions. Today on the show, in this season, I want you to remember we're in season 1, where we're interrogating the doctrine of God. Today, we have quite an interesting topic where we are going to study and interrogate God and idolatry. I'm Clayton Maredi, and my co-host is Pastor Kanimba. But on the show, we have a special guest whom I would want you to know. He's no ordinary man. He's coming to us from the University of Andrews with a PhD, majoring in New Testament and with a cognate of the Old Testament, professor who has written articles and books, and also he has held various positions in the church. He's been a director at the division level. He's been a director, even at the conference level, and he has also been a lecturer for the undergraduate and graduate schools. He's a former dean of seminary at AUA and IAS, and is a former Solusi University vice chancellor. And today, let me introduce none other than Professor J. Musosi. Professor J. Musosi, welcome to the show. If you would want to welcome our audience.
Thank you very much. Welcome to our show today.
Pastor Ganimba, please welcome the audience.
With much pleasure. Greetings, viewers and listeners.
Now let's get right into it. Idolatry. When you look at the word idolatry, the Bible is filled with verses and texts and passages where God is forbidding idolatry. Now the question that will come to our minds, what is idolatry? And what forms can we see? Is idolatry real? Do we have idolatry amongst us? Please shed some light.
Idolatry is the worship of images. It is the according of divine honor to things that are created, things that are other than the Creator himself. The essence of idolatry is to place significance on something that is above God. That is idolatry. The word idol is mentioned some 231 times in the scriptures. And so definitely idolatry is a very big topic in the scriptures. It is interesting to note that it's not only dominant in the Old Testament, it's also dominant in the New Testament, where we think that under the umbrella of Christianity, that maybe we had outgrown the problems of ancient idolatry. Unfortunately, that is not actually the case. So, worshipping of images, objects that are crafted by human beings, whatever shape they may be given, whether they resemble some animal or some other entity, they may be conceptual, but these objects are then given special reverence that only belongs to God. Sometimes it involves worshipping images that are found in nature. It may be some animals, it may be some trees, it could be some mountains or hills or certain stones. Those could become objects of worship. And I think we know that in many cultures around the world, there are certain sacred places with sacred objects, which are either made by human beings or created objects. There are also terrestrial objects, objects that are found here on earth, and there are celestial objects, worshipping the sun, the moon, some stars, maybe even horoscope, may be a form of idolatry, because it is according certain powers or ascribing certain powers to something that is created, and having those powers have an influence on human beings. So idolatry is rather a broad kind of concept.
Okay, Prof, within the domain of idolatry, can visuals that people use can they be classified as idolatry? For example, the depiction of the saints, image of the apostles hanging in churches or on walls or in their homes. But it makes easy for worshippers to make sense of their experience with God. Can we say homage to such is idolatry?
Okay. We could refer to something that's called iconography. Iconography is the construction or the making of certain symbols, generally that have religious significance. Iconography by itself is not idolatry, because iconography may be pictures, paintings, or carvings that simply represent something, but that are not intended to be accorded worship or reverence of any kind. For example, we have the sanctuary teachings of the Old Testament. And in the sanctuary teachings, the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, go to great details to describe some of the artifacts, some of the furniture that were found in there, That is not idolatry, because those are being used as a teaching model. So it is a way to help the believer to kind of visualize something that is being taught, so that it doesn't remain as an abstract concept. You can kind of have an idea. So if you are talking about the Ark of the Covenant, in which were the 10 Commandments, you then have vivid descriptions that are given of how it was supposed to be made. And an artist may be able to draw something based on the visualization that is given in the description. The idea is for somebody who is reading the scriptures to have an idea of what this thing must have looked like. There is no idea or no thought that this thing will be worshipped or reverenced. So when these pictures or symbols are used as teaching aids merely to convey certain ideas, then that is not idolatry. There are various objects that were taught, that were used to teach those kinds of lessons. We mentioned the sanctuary, the holy place. In fact, the court, the courtyard had a number of items.
True.
There was the altar of burnt offering. There was the laver where the priests would wash their hands and their feet before they went into service. The holy place had its own items. The most holy place had its own items. The dress of the priest is very elaborately described, and it was intended to convey certain lessons. Now, if we begin to ascribe reverential attention to those items, we're now trying to see them as kind of like holy objects that we must kind of worship in some way or revere in some way. We are now venturing into idolatry. So the same item for one person may become idolatrous if they are now worshiping it, giving it reverence. But to another, it may be simply a teaching symbolism that is used to help people understand. Each object in the sanctuary, for example, was intended to point beyond itself to the God who is above. So whether you are talking about the golden lampstand, the lampstand was intended to convey the idea of Jesus, the light of the world. So when the object ceases to point beyond itself and it becomes itself the object of veneration, then it is idolatry.
Oh, now, I want to use your words. For you have said, idolatry is when one worships an image, a painting, a sculpture, or anything. Now, we have a precedence in the Bible. Come with me to the book of Numbers in chapter 21 from verse 9 through all the verses.
Yes.
The children of Israel are in the wilderness and they complain and they were bit by snakes. Now, God, through Moses, he commands them to make a snake out of
Yes.
bronze. And he puts it up a pole. And he says, whoever looks to the bronze serpent will live. And indeed, people lived. Now, what's wrong with me? Today, I have my own image or a snake that I've put up in my own house. And each time I look up to it, I derive some form of worship. And I feel like I've worshipped. What's wrong with that? Yet I have it in the Bible. Ain't that a precedence?
Okay, what happened in the desert, as recorded in Numbers chapter 21?
Yes.
Yes. That is actually a very instructive kind of occasion. You will remember that the people had been bitten by not scorpions, not lions, not mosquitoes, but by snakes. And the thing that Moses was commanded to make was something that was the form of a snake. So the thing that had brought death into the camp is now being reflected by the thing that will remove death from the camp. I want you to to look at two texts very quickly. First, I want us to look at John chapter 3. You remember in John chapter 3, verse 14, and as Moses lifted the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. That's verses 14 and 15. I want you to note, Moses makes this serpent by divine instruction. God says, make this serpent. So, and then he is asked to lift it on a pole. I want you to catch the symbolism. The snake doesn't just lie on the ground and you look at it. It must be lifted on a pole. While it is lifted on the pole, people are then commanded to look at it. And if they look at it, they are going to live. And so, giving the interpretation, Jesus himself says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So the idea of a serpent that is lifted up, it is different from the serpents that are running around the ground and biting people on their feet. This one is lifted up. So this serpent that is lifted up has a different connotation. So just as Moses lifted up that serpent, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that, says verse 15, whoever believes not in the serpent, but whoever believes in him, in the Son of Man, will receive eternal life. So I want you to see how the serpent points way beyond itself. So the one who is looking at the serpent isn't just looking at the serpent. The serpent is helping this person, this viewer, to look beyond itself to something else. One other text very quickly. I want you to note here in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and I want you to look at verses 21 and 22. Let me read verses 20 to 22. But now Christ is risen from the dead and has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since by men came death, by men also came the resurrection from the dead. So God uses the symbol of that which brought the problem. In the beginning, man, Adam, brought death by disobedience. And when God decides on a redemption plan, he uses another man to reverse the process. So in the wilderness, the snake brought the poison that was killing people. And God uses the symbol of another snake. The same thing, but this one is lifted up. And it represents a savior who would be lifted up and whose presence would bring about restoration and healing.
Okay, Prof, if we could trace the Exodus narrative, we could see even Moses, the leader, using an object of a stick to perform miracles. Even when they were at Red Sea, he used the rod to divide the sea. Even Aaron in Exodus chapter 7 verse 2, he used a stick in front of great Pharaoh Thutmose III. So coming to us as worshippers and believers, there is much of biblical precedence in the Bible about using objects within worship. People now use stones, holy oil, bangles, holy water. Is it a form of idolatry, or should we use, because there is biblical precedent that Moses, even the great Moses, used a rod?
Yes. We should always be careful to read the text carefully. That's always important. If we don't read it very carefully, we will take the text and run our own errands with it. The text usually says what it wants to say. If we stick by the text and stay by it very carefully, we will find the difference. So with Moses' situation, he is doing exactly what God told him to do. There's no deviation. He is not being creative about his situation and finding a stick. He is doing exactly what God commanded him to do. Now, the one who was empowering the stick is God himself. So there is no power in the stick itself. If you were to go and steal the stick of Moses or the rod of Moses and go into the kinds of situations Moses went into, get to flooded rivers and stretch that stick over, nothing would happen because the power wasn't coming from the stick. It was coming from the God who commanded. So today, there are people who use many objects that they think possess power. So they think the object possesses the power. Not God, but the object. So they will have that object on their body because they think that as long as this object is here, it will protect me. So these objects are used for protection. People want to protect themselves. These objects are being used for people to gain wealth or riches. These objects are being used to gain success, however it is defined. They are being used for power. So there are even religious people who will get these magical objects to give them pulpit power. They want to speak in ways that will spellbind the audience. They are using objects. So they think that if they have this object, the object itself has the power. That's a dangerously high form of idolatry because they are infusing power into an object that was created. So if this object has the power to do it, why do I need God? So I come and stop by this object. So the object is not a pointer to a God who has power. The object itself has become a God that has power. And when that happens, we have fallen into the trap of idolatry. And many, many people today are trapped in that kind of situation where they use objects to gain power from the objects to accomplish what they want to accomplish. But you do not find biblical prophets being used that way, including Moses. He only did what God told him to do, and it was very clear from Moses, for Moses himself, and for all who were there to see that the power is not in the stick. The power is in the God who stands behind that stick, the God of Moses.
With what you're saying, Prof, I want to come back to the snake, the bronze snake.
Yes.
As you are rightfully putting it across, the snake didn't have power, but it was the faith. Now, you've mentioned and you've alluded to people who have the paraphernalia and different objects. And some can testify that they're having wealth, they're having riches from all these objects. But yet you're saying that the objects don't have power. So where could these riches be emanating from if the objects don't have power? Because today the world is in limbo because of all these evidences that are floating around.
Okay. The power must be coming from some other source, not from the objects. Just like the power of Moses' stick came from some other source, a legitimate source, that is God, there is a great controversy motif. There are powers that are fighting for the control of the human mind. They are fighting for allegiance of humanity. And those, that side of power will want to demonstrate itself. The scriptures themselves tell us about miracles that are performed by people who are empowered by another power. So just because something is working doesn't mean it's okay. You have to ask the question, where is that power come from? So we cannot say there is no power in these objects. The object itself does not possess the power. The power is being infused from elsewhere, which leads us to another question. Where is this elsewhere? Where it is coming from? If it's not coming from God, where is it coming from? So if I believe in God as having power over my life, why don't I go to God? Why do I bypass my relationship with God and go elsewhere where I don't want God to know I have gone because I want to get certain power? Where is it coming from?
So are you saying we're living in a parallel universe where you have this power that's enabling people to be rich? And if there is, please tell us this power.
It is not a parallel universe. If we do parallel, then these two will never meet. It means there will be two systems that will forever be parallel to each other. They are not parallel. There is coming a confrontation, a meeting and confrontation point, a point of decision where the one true power will do something to the wrong power. So it's not two parallel kinds of things. So the great controversy tells us that the devil is dead earnest in trying to convince humanity that he is the legitimate power. And he's going to do things to demonstrate his power. You read, for example, in Acts chapter 8 about Simon Magus, the one who had the magical powers, and people would flock to him and say, the great God, the great God, referring to a human being. He had the powers. But when the power of the gospel came along, that power was shattered, and Simon himself was converted to the right kind of power.
Wow. Wow. So before we go to the break, the professor has quite alluded a powerful point to those who have paraphernalia which are doing great things. Perhaps that power is not coming from God. Because if Moses and his rod did not have the power, because the power is coming from God, we ought to ask ourselves. At this moment, we'll take a break. Please do join us in the second segment as we continue the interrogation on this subject, God and idolatry.
Hot Grill, where the hard questions are answered.
Welcome. Would like to welcome you back to our second segment. Remember, we are interrogating the subject, God and idolatry. And as we saw in the first segment, there are so many things that can take the place of God. Now, in this second segment, allow me to pose this question, Prof. If you look at the depictions of Christ, whether in the Bibles, in our homes, we see paintings, we see pictures of Christ. Now, if this is anything to go by, can we call this idolatry? Can we say this is subtle idolatry? Because I want to see Christ, and when I have this nice portrait hung on my wall, and when each time I look at it, I feel this reverence, and I really want to worship God. Can you call me an idol worshiper?
I think idolatry comes in different forms. One form of idolatry is a gross or overt kind of idolatry. This is where somebody is actually physically bowing down before images and worshiping them. That's gross idolatry or overt idolatry. It is explicit. There are certain observable acts of worship that are associated with certain idols or images. So there is reverence that is offered. It may be to an object, it may be to some celestial or terrestrial body. It could even be to a person. We could actually worship a person. It could be an animal, it could be different things. It could be something that is very dear to us, but that the viewing of actually calls forth the kind of feeling of worship. It could be a loved one that we love so dearly that they elicit from us worship. That's a gross kind of idolatry. But there's also a more subtle kind of idolatry. And I think our modern age has a lot of this, so that we have many people who don't realize they're idolaters, but they're actually idolatrous. So when you are talking about this subtle kind, it is attaching a certain kind of significance to something And we all attach significance to things that we like in our lives. But it is attaching this significance to the point where this is receiving more significance than the one that we attach to God. So we may not be consciously aware of it, but we may cross the line and begin to accord this particular object such importance, such significance, that we don't give our God the same level of significance. That's becoming an idol. There's a certain kind of confidence that people have when they have something. But that confidence they have should never be higher than the confidence they have in God. So it could be that I have a very reliable car, and I know that when I start off on a journey, I'm pretty sure of getting where I'm going. It's not likely to break down because it's still pretty good. But if I put my confidence so much in the state of my car, I may be getting into subtle idolatry. If that confidence makes it such that I don't see the need for asking God to care for me on that journey, because with this kind of car, who needs a prayer? So when that kind begins to come, then I'm involved in idolatry without realizing it. It's a subtle kind of idolatry, and God's people need to be careful about that. This is especially important in our days because there are so many things that we attach a lot of significance to. We gather things around ourselves and we tend to attach significance to them, and to be careful that the significance never rises to the level that is accorded, that we accord to God. That's the touchstone of life, to be sure that we can test ourselves where we are.
Prof, there is something that have just popped up my mind. Many believers, there are some who worship even the calendar of their church leaders. They bow down in reverence, sincerely. They are sincere Christians as they are praying through their leaders to God. Even in the Middle East, there are some believers there who worship near facing the wall, kneeling down sincerely, are sending their petitions through the wall, reverently bowing down so that it will reach up to heaven. Is it a form of idolatry? Is bowing down a form of idolatry to a calendar, to a picture, or kneeling down in front of the wall?
When the Apostle Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, when he tells us that we are a royal priesthood, he's announcing the universal priesthood of all believers. He is saying that we do not need a mediator between us and God. The only mediator who is there for us is Jesus Christ. So we don't need some other objects that connect us with the true mediator or with God himself. So when we have these objects that we use to try to help us to connect, that is idolatry. That means that when we do that kind of thing, we have lost our way. It may even be a picture of Jesus Christ, a drawing of Jesus Christ. If I'm using it as a means to connect to God, then I have lost something. These art forms are intended to remind us and point us beyond themselves. They are not to become the medium through which we access God. We are supposed to access God directly. And so there is no, we need to be sure we are clear on that. Maybe I want us to read Leviticus 26, one of the texts that forbids idolatry. Chapter 26, Leviticus 26, verse 1. You shall not make idols for yourselves, neither a carved image nor a sacred pillar that you rear for yourselves, nor shall you set up an engraved stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. I want you to notice the idea of these idolatrous things, the images, the idols, is to bow down to them, to work through them to reach the divine. And the text is saying you shall not do that. You shall not access God through the means of some object. Any object that comes between us and God, that attempts to mediate between us and God, that is an idol.
Now, my mind right now is racing. Why it's racing, as you have seen, and as you have rightfully articulated it. Idol worship begins to take place the minute I ascribe worship to an object instead of God. Now I have a problem. They'll also tell you if you love something so much above the love of God, then it becomes your idol. But Prof, let's be real. I love my wife. I love my children. I love my father. I love my mother. I love my family. I see them. I touch them. Why then are we calling it idolatry? Or why would someone insinuate that that's idolatry? I love, your children love you, and I'm sure they love you above everything else in this world. How can that be idolatry?
There are two words that help to define. Those are the words more than. If the words more than can be put into that relationship, more than God, that's idolatry. If I passionately love my wife, but I put God above my wife in my adoration of him, then that's not idolatry. But if my love for my wife is going to compete with my love for God, then that's idolatry. So the word more than, if you love something or someone more than God, that has become idolatry. If you love food more than God, if you love entertainment more than God, if you love your phone, your classic phone, more than God, it's the more than. Now, how do we gauge the more than?
That was going to be my next question.
The amount of attention that we give to this object versus the attention we give to God. So where is my focus? What is it that I feel a deep loss about? Is it if this object is lost, or if my relationship with God is interrupted? If I missed my time for prayer and worship, devotion this morning, does it hurt me as much as if I forgot my phone at home? So the more than principle.
Okay, Prof, I have a question that...
But I think I saw another question that was at the tip of your...
Oh, no, please, go ahead.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, all right.
I'll come as a follow-up.
That's okay.
Yeah, I do have a question pertaining to, which is in closer relation to the previous question. The subject of money has always caused a great controversy in religion. Should we sanitize poverty? Because some say, and lack of cash, because some say if you love money, it is a form of idolatry. But after all, we all need money. Money is the vehicle for everything, for living, for buying, for trade. Money is the central linchpin. It plays a linchpin role in our lives. Money is power. Money does many things. Now to turn around and say the love of money is idolatry. It's clearly misinterpretation of the Bible. Should we grope into abject poverty because we want to shine idolatry?
I think your options are kind of misplaced, because you are talking about money and poverty, but when you come to your equation, you are now talking about the love of money and poverty. Those are not the two options, love of money and poverty. Maybe the options are really money and poverty. And I have not yet found a text in the Bible and I've gone through my Bible a number of times. I've not found a text in the Bible that says money is idolatry or is the root of all evil. But it is the love of money. And I think you can tell the difference. You have come across people who love money. Not people who would like to get some money, but people who love money. People who are going to break principle, they are going to break their morals to get money. They love money. So if there is a way to get into your pocket, to get into your wallet through any illegitimate means to get your money, they will do it. That's the love of money. But money can be earned in legitimate ways. And the biblical principles that have made for a wealth-building Protestant work ethic are the principles that respect and honor honest work. So, working honestly, the Bible tells us about investment principles. When you go to Matthew chapter 25, those who are commended are those who invested their means and got more. The one who did nothing is the one who is condemned. So the Bible is not giving us the option of money or poverty. It is contrasting the love of money as a misguided principle. That will lead to destruction. So money is not a problem in the Christian life. We need money. There are more stories that Jesus told about money than about anything else in all his parables.
Now, with what you've just said, in fact, it is Solomon who says, money answereth all things. Whether you're rich, you're poor, you're tall, you're short, everyone is after money. Now, I would want us to draw the line. For you've drawn the line when you said more than. Now, I need money. He needs money. You need money. Now, where is the balance? I want you to balance us here. How can I know that I've gone beyond? Because remember, 6 days thou shalt labor. And I need to labor. And also it does not mean I have to be so ignorant of ways of making money. I need to make money. So balance us here. Where is the line that when you cross this line, you have gone beyond the ordinary love for money?
Okay. If you look at 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, that is the passage you have been alluding to that says that the love of money is the root of all evil. So the love of money. When you go to Colossians 3, verse 5, it tells us that covetousness is idolatry. Covetousness. So covetousness is an inordinate desire to get something to the point where you want to get it through some inordinate or unfair means. You want to get something, you really want to get it, you're going to do anything, you throw away your morals because you want to get this thing. So it is covetousness, desiring to get what legitimately belongs to someone else. A Christian should be one who is engaged in business or investment or whatever line of development in such a way that when they go home, they are happy. And the person whom they were interacting with is also happy. So if my transactions are such that I fear to meet this person tomorrow because of the way I transacted with them, then I have crossed the line. But if this person, knowing exactly the details what we have transacted together, wants to meet me again tomorrow, then I think our business was done properly. Can it stand the test of morality? Can it stand the test of integrity? Do I do business with integrity, or do I do it so as to get money? If I know that I have something that I'm trying to sell, that's not quite wholesome. Am I honest enough to say to a potential client, I'm selling this item, it does have this problem?
They will not buy it.
Yeah. But if you want to be a person of integrity, you need to tell them there's a problem here. And then they choose to buy. If they are going to bargain for a lower price because the thing does have a problem, that's okay. But full disclosure in the things that we do.
Prof, I have a question. In this modern age, many believers use metaphysical substances such as bangles, holy oil, holy water, handkerchiefs. It's reasonable. They want to ignite their faith. They would want a substance that would assist them to worship. Is it wrong to use such substances? After all, they use them for protection, for guidance, putting salt on the doorpost so that it will protect them. Is it wrong? Is it a form of idolatry?
Do they believe in the salt or in the God of the salt? Who do they believe in?
It's the salt. For them, it's the salt.
Yeah. Do they believe in the bangle or in the God whom they worship? Who do they believe in? So anything that comes in between me and God, even if it is trying to produce good results, but if it comes between me and God, so that it is viewed as the thing that produces the result, that is idolatry.
Wow.
So they should not even practice that,
No.
though it has worked for them.
Though it has worked for them. There are many things that the servants of the devil have working for them.
Wow. Now, Prof, I would want you to give us the underpinning facts of this subject, God and idolatry. What would you really want to put across to our audience? And what are the facts and points that we need to remember?
I wanted to just go back to the actual commandment. We are dealing with idolatry. And I wanted to just very quickly mention that when you go to Exodus chapter 20, where the basic place where we find this commandment and where it is most largely elaborated, you're going to find that, number one, the first commandment, which says you shall have no other gods before me, cannot be separated from the second commandment.
Yeah.
All right.
So having other gods and idolatry are two sides of the same coin. Okay? So those have to be looked at together. The second point I want to bring out is that when you look at the second commandment, the one on idolatry, it's one of the most elaborated of the 10 commandments. That commandment and the fourth commandment are the most elaborated. The second commandment says, you shall not make for yourselves any carved image, any likeness of anything in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers unto to the children, to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, and showing mercy to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. I want you to note how elaborated it is. It has quite a number of things that are indicated in it. And if you were to count the word space that it occupies more than 30%, between 33 and 35% of the word count in the whole Decalogue, this command alone. And then when you go to the Sabbath command, which begins at verse 8 through 11, it occupies another 32% or so of the word count. You put these two together, they occupy over 2/3 of the word count of the Decalogue. What does the law of proportion tell us? When somebody spends a lot of time explaining one thing, then just one or two words on something, a lot of time on another, isn't that suggesting the importance, the significance? So this commandment that deals with idolatry is addressing something God knew was going to be a problem to his children, not only in ancient times, but in modern times. And the fourth commandment, which occupies another third, is also a command that is forgotten by the rest of the Christian world today, to remember the Sabbath, to keep it holy. And even those who proclaim and claim to remember the Sabbath oftentimes don't keep it holy. So these two commands together form more than 2/3 of the Decalogue in terms of word space. And if the fourth commandment had been well observed by humanity, then idolatry would not appear. So it's important to realize that we are dealing with anchor points to our faith. It's very important to understand the role of idolatry.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. To our audience, we've been interrogating God and idolatry. Maybe you could be idol worshipping in subtle ways. Maybe you're worshipping idols in gross ways. But our plea and prayer is that we return to God's word. For today, we end it here. But before we end it, I'm going to ask my co-host pastor to give us a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Dear God, we need to thank you for such a wonderful time that you have given to us. You have given us grace yet another day. Help us to understand the issue and the repercussions of idolatry. Thank you, God, for opening it out clearly. Help the viewers and listeners as they listen to this subject.
Amen. Please do sure to join us in our next episode as we interrogate and grill hot issues from the Bible. God be with you all.
Vachene vachapfekedzwa nguo chena kunyikayo vokumbana namponesi zvekusazo patsanazve miri yokwenyanza miri yokwenyanza miri yokwenyanza kwenyanza tichazokumbana 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 miri yokwenyanza handingatyi matambudzo nekuti anozopera hondo nzara nekushaya tichazoti kwasarai miri yokwenyanza miri yokwenyanza miri yokwenyanza miri yokwenyanza tichazokumbana 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 miri yokwenyanza nditakure tsoka dzangu undisvitse kunyikayo ndokurumbidza nekusingazoperi tasvikayo miri yokwenyanza yo kwenyanza ticha zokumbana ticha zokumbana ticha zokumbana biri yo kwenyanza ticha zokumbana ticha zokumbana biri yo kwenyanza zokumbana